It's wonderful looking through old photos, you know. This one was taken way back in 1972. Yeah, it's not too bad.
Bermuda's way of life has developed into a tapestry made up of many layers. Culture, it seems, is all around us, all the time, and always evolving. But for a long time, many thought culture in Bermuda didn't even exist at all until one woman came along and showed us just how brilliant Bermuda's culture really is. Hello, my name is Grace. This is Gary, and this is Leo, and we are and a company. We'll explain what that means a little later. For now, though, we are going to tell a story about a woman who has worn many hats in her time and worked with many people from across the cultural and social strata of Bermuda. We are talking, of course, about Ms Ruth E Thomas, MBE, JP. She has been an educator, a writer, a singer, an actor, an amateur historian, a civil servant, a patron of the arts, a steward of the arts, and, very importantly, a mentor.
She's been an educator who was at the forefront of some very important education initiatives. She's been a performer who has sung in churches, acted in many plays, and delivered Bermuda stories to the hungry masses. And as a cultural steward in government, she has opened doors for many of our artists and cultural leaders.
Say her first name in the right context, and we all know who you mean. It's like saying Ringo, Tiger, or Iman. Ruth has been described as an agent of change and growth in art and culture. We're going to add education, which is where we appropriately begin.
Ruth's formal education began at the Central School and then Skinner School on Orange Valley Road, not far from her Prospect home where she lived with her grandmother. Her grandmother was the most influential person in her life, and she made sure that Ruth understood the value of a good education.
My granny was an old woman who came from Jamaica when she was quite young, but although she was old and had very little schooling, she was able to teach me a lot to keep me positive.
But as she explains, it was a different time.
When I was about 4, I saw bigger children going off to something they call school. Well, I wanted to go to school too. And I bugged and bugged and bugged my grandmother to let me go to school. So one day she decided to take me to a school which was not too far away. There was a lady who owned a little private school. Well, when we got there, that lady came to the door and she spoke to my granny. "Oh, good morning, Mrs. Jones. I see you have your little girl with you." My granny said, "Yes, she wants to come to school." And the lady's face changed. And she said, "Oh, dear, I can't take her." But my granny said, "I heard you had room for more children." So she said, "Yes, I do, but I can't take your little girl." And granny said, "Well, why is that?" She said, "Because your little girl was born out of wedlock. And I don't have any children in my school who don't have a father and mother living together."
Undeterred, Ruth's grandmother found a school that would take her, but she would eventually find herself at Central on Glebe Road.
Central School was a big, big school. It had 1,200 children. A couple of classes had as many as 60 children, so you were crammed into this small area.
Her secondary school years were at the Berkeley Institute, and upon graduating from the Berkeley, she was approached by Dr. Kenneth Robinson, the principal at Francis Patton Primary School, who was on the search for a part-time music teacher. Even though she was fresh out of secondary school, she took the job.
There was a knock at my door at home, my grandmother's door, and there was this man standing at the door. It turned out to be Dr. Robinson. He was looking for a young person to be a helper in his school with music. I had been studying music with a Mrs. Catherine Henderson, who probably taught every child on this island to play the piano. So I could play the piano. And I used to do a lot of singing. We had heard about Dr. Robinson, who had become the principal of Francis Patton, and we were so proud of him, although we didn't know him. And so, yes, I said, yes, I'll do that. But I said to him, under one condition, that I don't have to work with very small children. Well, when he met me at the gate, the first Monday morning when I went to his school, he said, well, Ms. Thomas, I will show you your class. I thought, my class? I'm supposed to be helping. He took me to a classroom of 5- and 6-year-old children, and I felt like saying, no, this can't be my class.
Afterwards, she went to both the Ottawa and Toronto Teachers College on a government teachers training scholarship, where she worked towards a specialization in teaching 4- to 8-year-olds. In 1955, she returned to Bermuda and to teaching part-time at Francis Patton as an assistant teacher.
I was brought up by my grandmother. She meant everything to me. She was my support. She was my guidance. She was everything. She passed on just before the Cambridge exams. I was left alone. Where would I go? Who was I to be with? I had no hope. I had nothing. Dr. Robinson said, you have to go on and do some more studying and become a certified teacher. I said, well, I have no money. How can I do that? He said, well, go back to school. I said, I can't do that. Oh, yes, you can, he said. I've already spoken with the principal, Freddie Febret, and he has assured me that there is space for you in the classroom where you need to be to take the exam that you failed when your grandmother died. He said, I'm pretty sure that the shock of her death caused you to fail. Dr. Robinson was very concerned that young blacks knew how to follow a path and what was available for them. I was by this time, through a friend, living with 2 old ladies from a church, the Gospel Hall in Cobbs Hill, because I had nowhere to go. And I had September, October, and November, those 3 months, to go over the new curriculum, the new textbooks, and to be ready for the exam at the end of November. But now I got to wait for the results. And I was so thankful that the results were good. I had passed. Thanks to Dr. Robinson, who said, you will come back as a person who's ready for Teachers Training College.
Her studies resumed in 1961 at the London University of Education until she returned to Francis Patton in 1968.
Ruth was the first teacher selected to take part in a new initiative where teachers were seconded into the administrative roles in education for a year. According to the Director of Education at the time, D.J. Williams, those selected had demonstrated their ability through service in the school system. She hit the ground running. She supervised the infants department of all schools and oversaw and advised teachers at private nursery schools. At the same time, she was teaching music at Warwick Secondary School and Woodlands Remedial School, followed by teaching an infants class at Friendship Vale, a school for special needs children. Separate to all of this, she was also a secretary of the Bermuda Union of Teachers.
In 1967 and 1968, Ruth was again selected to supervise and run Head Start, a new program set up to prepare students entering the school system for the very first time. This led to the government preschool system also being established in 1968. She returned to her studies that year at Goldsmiths College, as well as Queen's University, Brock University, and Indiana University, and then returned to Bermuda in 1972, when she became the Junior Government Education Officer for Early Childhood Education. Within a decade, the government preschools, with Ruth at its helm, were providing for half of Bermuda's 4-year-olds. It was as if the preschool system was specifically designed for her to lead.
I don't think I chose education. I think education chose me. I don't think there was anything I didn't like. I think I just love the children and I love the work.
Keep in mind that during the 70s, education in Bermuda was about to enter a new era. All schools were racially desegregated by way of the Education Act of 1971. Tertiary education would also take a leap forward when the Bermuda Technical Institute, the Academic Sixth Form Center, and the Bermuda Hotel and Catering College would all be amalgamated under the banner of the Bermuda College and incorporated by the Bermuda College Act in 1974.
With education, you have to love it when you're teaching. It's very special. I will say to anybody, if you don't like children, don't go into education. You really have to remember to give, to be giving, to be very alert, very aware of every child's needs. A teacher is really a social worker. You're a parent. You're so many things other than just a classroom teacher.
She also became chair of the Queen's Birthday Ball Committee after Dame Marjorie Bean stepped down. Started in 1953, the committee organized the annual Debutantes Ball as a way to introduce young ladies to society and as a fundraiser for the Berkeley Institute's library, and ran for more than 40 years.
These were all the people who helped her to put that ball together. I'm up there in the back of the line. We used to have some beautiful young people taking part in that ball.
She continued on in her roles at the Education Department throughout the 70s and into the 1980s, but soon she would be making a left turn that would take her down a completely different but influential path.
And I kept saying to myself, I need something else to do. I want something to do outside of education. I felt that I mustn't let myself get bored or be mired in a rut. And suddenly I got a call to the office of Sinclair Richards.
Ruth had been full-time with the Department of Education for 12 years when Lotu Robinson, the director of the Department of Community Affairs, and the late Reginald Ming, government youth advisor, met with Chief Education Officer Joseph Sinclair Richards in 1984. Lotu was due to leave for a year of studies in London, and Ruth was put forward to Mr. Richards as the person to fill his position for the year. It was thought that Ruth's background in education and the arts would be an asset. She accepted the position, but little did she know that 1 year would turn into 13 very fruitful and busy years.
Now remember, I've been praying day in and day out for something different from education. Here's a chance to go to something totally different. What do I say? Not to Mr. Richards, but to myself. Oh, no, dear Lord, I couldn't do that. No, God, no. And I think just at that time, Premier was John Swan, had attached the word culture to community services. But anyhow, off I went.
It was now the Department of Community and Cultural Affairs. Community Affairs was a relatively small government department that primarily dealt with our seniors, the disabled, the youth, and the libraries. The department was also responsible for organizing Heritage Day, which had expanded into Heritage Week and then Heritage Month. With only one other staff member, Mrs. Ann Francis, she went straight to work.
Once we decided to have Heritage Month, after a few times of doing that, we realized we needed somebody to head up that particular section. And so Ruth was working in the Department of Education at that time, and we were able to get her transferred to the ministry to take on that role. It was important that she was at the Department of Education because we wanted to get the heritage program into schools, and she was able to do that.
I went to community services, not thinking of culture, but it very quickly came into the fore.
A common refrain that Ruth would hear was that Bermuda has no culture. In fact, famed violinist Yehudi Menuhin once called Bermuda a cultural desert. But when she took the position in 1984, she set about trying to, in her words, slip in cultural things. The very first thing she organized was a memorial service for Joseph Hayne Rainey in St. George's Square in 1985. Rainey was a former resident of Bermuda and the first black person elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. She started the Premier's Concert in 1986, which highlighted students in the performing arts. The only thing was that she had to do it with zero budget. The concert proved to be a success, and so the following year she went directly to Premier John Swan and asked him for a budget, which ended up being a meager $6,000.
When I compare what's going on today with the early days, it's absolutely quite amazing what has been achieved over the years. There was no budget for the department that I started to work with. We had salaries. We had no budget for the program until pretty much into the second year. So it's not surprising that there was limited funds for the Department of Culture. But we were able to work with community groups, and especially because the focus was on schools at that particular time and programs in schools. We were not handicapped too much by not having a budget, but certainly by the second year of the program, there were funds for various programs and so forth.
She never returned to teaching because at the end of her secondment, Ruth went back to the Premier and argued that she should stay on the job. She presented him with a report on Bermuda's culture, and he agreed that she should stay on. Bermuda's culture now had someone fighting for it.
And so many people, they would say to me, Bermuda doesn't have a culture. When I first heard that, I really thought somebody was just being facetious, but they were not. They meant it. I mean, people didn't even look at our buildings and say, well, architecture, the way we build our houses, the way we dress our houses, no, that is culture. Bermuda ain't got no culture. And there it is, right there, the language.
Ruth became the Bermuda government's first cultural affairs officer, a brand new position within the government in 1988. With the position came a significant increase in budget, too, a whopping $619,400. She did face some headwinds, however, as some didn't think government needed another department. They asked, how can culture keep her occupied full-time? When asked about those who opposed her new department, she bluntly told the Bermuda Sun, once they realize the importance, they will change their minds.
I don't think there were a whole heap of politicians who thought culture was important. There were other things that were important, and culture didn't look like it was going to bring in any money. One high-positioned civil servant said to me, well, why do you need, let the National Trust do it. And I said, that showed me that he didn't quite understand what we were referring to. As I told you, we always refer to as a way of life. And almost everything around you is cultural.
In the same interview, she added, we have to pay more attention to what is uniquely ours. I have found that young people can talk more about British, American, and West Indian culture than they can about Bermudian culture. With Mrs. Anne Francis and new department addition, Ms. Ruth E Thomas, Ruth simply continued the mission. But it wasn't until September 1991 that the Department of Cultural Affairs under Minister Leonard Gibbons was officially established with Ruth at the helm. With it came a brand new office space on Court Street, too.
During the 60s, the formation of a Bermuda Arts Council had been floated and was generally well received. It wasn't until 1969 that the BAC was formed by an act of Parliament and then convened for the first time in January 1970. Ruth joined the council in 1971 and then became chair in 1984 until 1992. That's 21 years. No wonder she had her finger on the pulse of Bermuda's arts community. As council chair, she initiated the annual Bermuda Arts Council Awards in 1988, which has honored many of our established artists. The award ceremony continues to this day.
In 1988, she asked the Bermuda College to find a lecturer who would conduct a weekly workshop for seniors with the intention to compile these stories in one place. It took longer than expected, but in 1993, the department published Bermuda Recollections, a compilation of stories told by 30 contributors and recorded by Elizabeth Jones. The book was a success. It had sold out, prompting a second printing 6 months later. Bermuda Recollections is probably one of the best examples of how Ruth quickly integrated culture in her new department's portfolio. It is rich in detail and conjures up vibrant images in one's mind of another Bermuda, where it was slower and quieter, and the rapid economic expansion of the second half of the 20th century still hadn't arrived.
Let's now jump back to 1967 for a minute. A few months before Ruth went off to study in London that year, a report on educational television in Bermuda was compiled by a visiting official from the Center for Educational Television in London and presented to Dr. Kenneth Robinson at the Department of Education. Ruth was already on television as the host of 2 children's programs on ZFB TV, the 6 o'clock club and children's time since 1965. It was through Goldsmiths College that she studied educational broadcasting at the British Broadcasting Corporation. So 20 years later, she harnessed the power of television and began using TV as a way of getting culture into homes. First, she created Bermudian Profiles in 1987, sponsored by the Bank of Bermuda, aired on Sunday evenings for almost a decade on ZBM TV.
This is Ruth Thomas with a Bermudian Profile.
These short vignettes featured Bermudians and organizations from across the social and cultural spectrum.
Bermudian Profiles has been a presentation of the Ministry of Community and Cultural Affairs.
As well as half our productions on Bermuda's forts, architecture, and gum bays, she also got well-known local television programs up and running in the 90s like Treasures, a seniors profile show, and The Learn-A-Lots.
And all of us are learners!
A children's information show. Both ran for well over a decade.
In 1991, she started the annual Emancipation Commemoration Service, where an estimated crowd of 2,000 showed up for the first event. This program and the aforementioned Premier's Concert continues to this very day. In her capacity as Cultural Affairs Officer for the government, Ruth continued to make great strides by supporting many cultural and arts organizations and getting them into the national and international spotlight. An example was when the department helped to fund Places Gum Bay Troops' participation in a parade in Massachusetts in 1992.
Into the 90s, the team at Cultural Affairs continued the work of getting Bermuda's story documented and out to the public in whatever way it could. The name Ruth Thomas was now synonymous with Bermuda culture, But after 41 years in the civil service, retirement beckoned, and on March 31, 1997, she bid farewell to the department that she had built. It's not every day that a civil servant's retirement makes the headlines, but it was important enough for the Royal Gazette and the Bermuda Sun to print write-ups.
I knew there was a lot to do, but the time comes when, whether you want to go or not, and although you know you want to do more, you have to find another way to do it, but not in the organized job, say, because I'm still doing cultural things. I mean, people still call me for ideas, and sometimes I'm just walking along, minding my own business, and I'll see something, and I think, oh, that's culture. There's so much, still so much to do. So much. There will always be a whole lot to do in culture, always. As long as you've got people, you're going to have culture.
We now know of her accomplishments via the civil service, in education and culture. What we should also remember is her accomplishments in the performing arts. Music, she said in 1987, is my best friend. In 1997, she remembered the music that ran through Prospect when she was a young girl. When I was tiny, I would run out of the house, across the road, up the bank, and through the wire fence to get as close as possible to the military band that used to play every day at Prospect. I'm sure my love of music was partly due to the proximity of our house to Prospect and the constant stream of music. There were fewer houses then, and no noisy cars. So when the North Village Band was playing, you could hear the strains of their music down on North Shore. And even when the Salvation Army and Boy Scouts paraded down Cedar Avenue, the wind would blow the music up and across the hill, and it seemed as if my entire life was filled with music.
Let's not forget that she also tread a few boards in her time. Her acting debut was in White America for the Studio Theater in 1964. She thought she was called in to help the chorus with singing, but instead the director, the late Hastings Saltus, thrust a script into her hand. Ruth protested that she was a singer, not an actress. It would be the first of many acting roles. She appeared in other productions for the Studio Theater as well as the Bermuda Musical and Dramatic Society and the Gilbert and Sullivan Society. In her appearance in James Baldwin's The Amen Corner in 1970, one reviewer wrote, "Margaret Alexander, a female pastor, played with stunning depth and realism by Ruth Thomas," and later adding, "Throughout the play, Ms. Thomas copes brilliantly with the tremendous role of grappling with the many problems facing her." In 1979, television producer and Bermuda resident, the late Arthur Rankin, produced a made-for-TV movie filmed in Bermuda, The Ivory Ape. Ruth had a very brief role playing a tenacious reporter.
However, an expert has agreed to lead the hunt, a man most qualified to track big game.
Who is he, sir?
His name will be announced shortly. Mr. Maiden.
And several Bermudian actors, such as Charles Jeffers and Marlene B. Landy, were cast in various roles, including yours truly. Her most recent acting role was in Special Person, a one-woman play written by the late Jean Hannant in 2004.
Also in 1970, the Bermuda Arts Council staged the Summer Festival, a precursor of sorts to the Bermuda Festival. The headline production that inaugural year was The Life of Galileo. It was directed by soon-to-be legendary stage and film director Mike Leigh, and Ruth played the role of Mrs. Sarti, the housekeeper to the late Earl Cameron's Galileo. The Royal Gazette's Marion Robb said in her review that Ruth Thomas as Galileo's housekeeper scores with a clear and natural delivery and a consistent characterization.
Ruth is also a storyteller too. Bermuda's very own griot. Sit with her for 10 minutes and she's already telling you a story. Something about a place, person, or thing that maybe you never knew about. She wants you to know.
We had on trumpet Jake Fox, Christopher Frith, Callum Moll, and Matthew Ross. On baritone,
by the way, Matthew Ross was a soloist in the Premier's concert last year. That's John Ross's child. Well, he's from Somerset, from Somerset, so we had to mention that.
On trombone, we had Philip Hagan, we had Matthew Hogan, Brianna Roach.
That's Conrad's daughter. You all say, and who's your people? You know that.
May I finish?
Yes, Gary.
Ruth once said, "This place is crammed with stories with our traditions and our rituals. All you need to do is go to Hamilton and you can still see rituals in action. Let one lady meet another lady and she will say, 'How are you? I haven't seen you in a long time. How's your mama? I heard your daddy was sick.' This becomes a ritual in sharing information and use of language." And so, in 1986, she started Ruth Thomas and Company, a troupe of storytellers that would read Bermuda stories made up of traditions, folklore, historical facts, and even some gossip for flavor. Each mosaic, as these performances were called, was written by Ruth, sometimes by hand, and performed in conversational style by an impressive array of performers, including the three you see here. We are the And Company.
But, don't be fooled by what you see. I mean, they give me a hard time. They get this script and they say, "Well, she's got more lines than I have. And I don't like this part." Oh, they're terrible. I'm telling you, see Leo there looking like a perfect gentleman? One time we were doing a Christmas traditions mosaic in what was the old shed, on Front Street across from what was Trimmingham's. The place was packed. There were people hanging from the rafters. If the fire chief had come, he would have thrown his eye. The regiment band performed. We had other performers, and there we were doing our mosaic. And the audience was wonderful. And because it was Christmas, I had invited the Gumbays to come. So at the appointed moment, the Gumbays came in and they danced their hearts out. As they were dancing out, I looked at the stage and I said, "But I had more actors than this." Gary and Leo had gone. Gary I expect, but Leo had danced out with the Gumbays. And we had to sit there and wait until they decided to come back. So don't be fooled by them.
Other added features of a mosaic might be choreography by Conchita Ming with the National Dance Theatre, or choral music by the ensemble singers directed by the late Lloyd Matthew. Mosaics continued well into the 21st century, which included 2 performances in the Bermuda Festival, a 2003 performance titled Walk Together Children, and a 2009 performance titled Women of Our Time, On Whose Shoulders We Stand. And speaking of the Bermuda Festival, of course, Ruth was a member of the programming committee for many years. In 2010, 9 mosaics were published into 1 volume by the then Department of Community and Cultural Affairs, which included charcoal drawings by Edwin Smith. In 2023, Ruth donated all 90 mosaic scripts to the Brian Berlin Research Center at the Bermuda College Library.
Also in 1986, Ruth joined another mission that would have a lasting impact in the years ahead. There was a dream to open a national gallery that, in her words, would house exhibitions and collections of the visual arts that would facilitate an understanding of Bermuda's cultural identity. extend knowledge of and respect for local and international artists, and encourage and perhaps even ignite a significant level of interest by the locals in the visual arts. She joined a committee of prominent Bermudian artists that met and thrashed out what this gallery would look like. After several years of meetings, the Bermuda National Gallery finally opened its doors in 1992 in the upper level of the City Hall foyer in the city of Hamilton. Over the years, Ruth would get people into the gallery by holding informal lunch and learns for tourists and expatriate workers, as well as slipping in the occasional Mosaic in the evenings. In 1994, the department facilitated a UNESCO-sponsored traveling exhibition of contemporary artists of Dutch, English, French, and Spanish Caribbean islands called Carib Art, to be exhibited at the Bermuda National Gallery. The Bermuda National Gallery is now a major art institution in Bermuda, if not the major art institution in Bermuda. And it has gone on to exhibit the works of Bermudian artists, both from within and outside of Bermuda, as well as works by international artists such as Ebony Patterson and Andy Warhol. The B&G would never have had the impact it has had if not for the dedication from Ruth Thomas and other Bermudian artists that met for so many evenings over 6 years. In 2004, Ruth retired from the gallery's board, upon which she was made a founding trustee.
To all of Leo's other traits, he is a scrapper. The rooster can fight.
In these later years, Ruth has never lost touch with the cultural landscape that she carefully cultivated for so many years. Like a visiting sage, she could be seen at various arts and cultural events around Bermuda, dispensing her wisdom and insight. Ruth didn't invent culture. It was already there, and we were all participating the entire time. All she did was give it more room to operate in. Not bad for a little girl from Prospect, Bermuda.
There is one area of Ruth's life that, as she says, not many people know about, if at all.
I can tell you a story that a lot of people on this earth, in this Bermuda, don't know. You know, Bermuda's small, we know everything. But a lot of people don't know that I was born to a teenage mother. And I think, from what I can gather from bits and pieces that I've heard, I think teenagers think they know everything. I think she felt that, okay, this is her baby. She could take care of her baby. And she didn't want her mother or her stepfather to be she could taking care of her child. She could do that herself. But then she realized that it wasn't as easy as she thought. So she gave me away as an infant to the Sunshine League. And my grandmother spent ages looking for her grandbaby. And eventually somebody who was working or used to pass the Sunshine League saw me and said to my granny one day, "I think I've seen your baby," and told her where she thought she saw me. And my granny went to the Sunshine League and was able to get me. So I was brought up by my grandmother. What I would do would be to ride my bicycle to where the old Phoenix store was. And outside of the Phoenix store was a clock. And people would say, "I'll meet you in town by Phoenix clock." So that was a regular meeting place. I would go between the ages like 8, 9, 10, 11, and stand there. I'd park my pedal cycle and stand there and watch every woman go by. Because everybody used to tell me that I looked just like my mother. So I would look at every woman, every black woman, to see if she looked like me, to see if she was my mother. And I've often wondered, what would I have done if I did see her? What would I have said to her? One of her sisters, Edna, who knew that I always wanted to meet my mother, And so my aunt took me to see her one evening. I don't think I ever said a word to her because I didn't know what to say. But I think I just stared at her for the whole time I was there with her. And then after that, I seldom saw her.
And despite these very early challenges, Ruth forged a path for herself that not only benefited Bermuda, but also included others.
If it wasn't for Ruth, I don't think that we would be as appreciative of our culture or have been as aware as we are now, but also of other aspects of our history. And I think that Ruth has lent a hand in my search for that. It has broadened my eyes and helped me as a choreographer, as a historian.
I think often that if it weren't for Ruth Thomas, none of this would ever have come to be. None of it. And I quite mean that. There would have been no incentive for me to go out on my own and just try this as a private individual. I needed some agency, and the government was that agency.
Throughout her entire career in the civil service, she has shown deep interest in people while upholding a strong moral compass. She is a sharp observer and has this ability to read the community. Speaking at an all-male room at the Kiwanis Club in 1977, she talked about the role fathers should be taking in the development of their children. She said, "Fathers are capable of doing anything in this world. At least that's what the children tell us." Ruth tells us what her approach to life has always been about.
One of the things in life that's important and that we sometimes forget is that we are here to serve. Marjorie Bean always used to say, service is the rent you pay for the space you occupy on earth. So when I think of work, education, culture, or anything else, it was all service. And I think that was because of the way my grandmother taught me.
This is not the first time that Ruth Thomas has been recognized for her work and dedication, and we suspect this will not be the last honor she will receive. In fact, in 1994, she was appointed a member of the Order of the British Empire, an MBE, for her services to education and the Bermuda Arts Council. But what's the point here? Well, just like many of the educational, cultural, and arts groups, organizations, and programs she has either led, managed, founded, co-founded, performed in, or been a part of, she too is an institution.
A pioneer, perhaps? Her modus operandi this entire time has been about service. She has provided the opportunities for others to speak their voices to the masses, or to get their head start in life, or to tell their own story in whatever way it came out. The educational, cultural, and art communities in Bermuda have Ruth Thomas to thank for opening doors and letting them through. This legacy can be seen today with the myriad of examples of Bermudiana being celebrated and enjoyed and studied in full. One would say, this is her mosaic. On the eve of her retirement, she gave an interesting quote, which could be an analogy on her life. "I have a garden the size of a handkerchief, but I like to get my hands in the soil, and I do love to see things grow."
Ms. Ruth E Thomas, Bermuda's cultural doyenne, a cultural icon and the original culture warrior. Truly, she is Bermudian excellence. And we can't argue more than that.
It is my opinion that one of the major roles of the arts is like that of a mirror reflecting our identity. This is important in Bermuda. because we are inundated constantly with persons from other cultures, either for business or pleasure. We have often subordinated our own taste to the criteria of others. This is cultural surrender through which we could be in danger of losing whatever identity we have, losing a trove of cultural customs, forgetting our traditions, changing our folklore, and neglecting the factors that provide guidance or direction, that give meaning to life and ensure a moral compass. When these things disappear, so do the many factors that provide the framework within which we identify our priorities and goals.